everybody, welcome in to my new viewers and welcome back to my Serendipity Subbies. You have tuned in to Colleen C. to Serendipity, and I'm Colleen. Today is October 18th, 2022, and I would like to bring you this day in history. On October 18th, 1867, the U.S. formally takes possession of Alaska after purchasing the territory from Russia for $7.2 million, or less than 2 cents an acre. Indigenous people settled the unforgiving territory thousands of years earlier. The Alaska Purchase comprised 586,412 square miles, about twice the size of Texas, and was championed by William Henry Seward, the enthusiastic expansionist Secretary of State under President Andrew Jackson. Russia wanted to sell its Alaska territory, which was remote and difficult to defend, to the U.S. rather than risk losing it in a battle with a rival such as Great Britain. Negotiations with Seward, 1881 to 1872, and Russia's minister to U.S. Eduard Salky began in March 1867. However, the American public believed the land to be barren and worthless, and dubbed the purchase as Seward's Folly and Andrew Jackson Polar Bear Garden, among other derogatory names. Some animosity towards the project may have been a byproduct of President Johnson's own unpopularity. As the 17th U.S. president, Johnson battled with radical Republicans in Congress over Reconstruction policies following the Civil War. He was impeached in 1868 and later acquitted by a single vote. Nevertheless, Congress eventually ratified the Alaska deal. Public opinion of the purchase turned from favorable when gold was discovered in Nome, Alaska in 1899, sparking a gold rush. Alaska became the 49th state on January 3rd, 1959, and is now recognized for its vast natural resources. Today, 25% of Americans' oil and over 50% of its seafood come from Alaska. It's also the largest state area, about 1/5 the size of lower 48 states combined, though it remains sparsely populated. The name Alaska is derived from the Aleut word Alaiska, which means great land. Alaska has 2 official state holidays to commemorate its origins. Seward's Day, observed the last Monday in March, celebrate the March 30th, 1867 signing of the land treaty between U.S. and Russia, and Alaska Day, observed every October 18th, marks the anniversary of the formal land transfer. Now I would like to bring you some more information about Alaska. Why the purchase of Alaska was far from folly. The treaty enlarged the United States by 586,000 square miles, an area more than twice the size of Texas. All of the bargain prices all for the bargain price of around 2 cents an acre. Yet, because some politicians and journalists considered Alaska a barren wasteland and inherently opposed anything supported by President Andrew Johnson. It became popularly known as Seward's Folly. That label stuck. Never mind that Seward was economically vindicated long ago by the discovery of gold and oil, not to mention the throngs of tourists that visit the state each summer. Alaska has been populated longer than any other location in the Americas, with first people crossing over from Asia no later than 15,000 years ago. However, it remained unknown to most of the world until 1741, when explorer Vitus Bering arrived at the head of a scurvy-racked Russian expedition and claimed the land for the Tsar. Russian fur traders soon began doing business there, but few stayed longer than necessary. In fact, no permanent colony settlement would pop up until 1784, and there were never more than a few hundred Russians living in Alaska at any one time. Far from self-sufficient, the colony depended on native tribes and the British and the Americans for supplies, the later two of which, along with Spanish and French, had been exploring the area since the late 1700s. Eventually, Russian officials became worried that the U.S. settlers would one day overrun Alaska, such as they had in Texas. These officials already feared losing nearly defenseless colony to Great Britain, a naval power that had defeated Russia in the Crimean War 1853 to 1856, and left it ravaged by debt. When, to top it off, the fur trade declined, even the Tsar owner brothers called Alaska a luxury that Russia could ill afford. By the late 1850s, Russia and the United States had entered into preliminary negotiations over the sale of the territory. The talks were cut short by the outbreak of the American Civil War, but not for Senator William H. Seward, a erudite expansionist who would serve as Secretary of State during both Lincoln and Johnson's administrations, declared that the towns and forts of Alaska would yet become the outpost of their own country. Within months, the Civil War's end, Seward brought up the issue of Alaska with Edward D. Salkey, the Russian minister to the United States, who subsequently received authorization from the Tsar to sell it. Secret negotiations between Seward and Staukel began around March 11, 1867, and after working throughout the night, the pair signed a treaty on March 30th, stipulating that the United States would purchase Alaska for $7.2 million in gold, as was typical for the time. Alaska's vast indigenous population was never consulted. Seward hoped the Senate would ratify the treaty that same day, but the matter instead remained pending for a week and a half, during which time Seward hosted several luxurious dinner parties aimed at swaying the senators in attendance. The press, meanwhile, having a field day. Most newspapers supported the deal, but local majority largely associated with radical Republican fraction of the Republican Party, mercilessly lambasted it, referring to Alaska as such names as Johnson's Polar Bear Garden, Walrussia, and Russian Fairyland. Incidentally, the phrase by which it is known best, Seward's Folly, was not uttered until years later. Horace Gridley, author of the New York Tribune, led the opposition, writing, among other things, that most of Alaska was barren, not worth taking as a gift. Some senators were equally skeptical, with one joking to his colleagues that he would support taking possession of the land only if Seward be compelled to live there. Yet that same senator failed in an attempt to delay the proceedings, and the treaty ended up being approved on April 9th by a 37-2 vote. President Johnson next appointed General Lovell H. Rasul to facilitate the transfer of power. Sailing out of New York on August 31st, Rasul made his way across Panama and up to San Francisco, where ships laden with troops and supplies were waiting for him. From there he endured seasickness and chills on a slow voyage north to Seneca, the only sizable Russian town in Alaska, arriving on October 18th. Later that day, Russian flags were taken down and U.S. flags was raised in ceremonial attended by Russians and American troops and a few indigenous leaders. All interaction between Russia and America were of the friendliest character, reported Roussseau, Rousseau, who would go on to describe the climate rains a great deal, the people quiet, orderly, and law-abiding, the fisheries very fine, and even the potatoes small but the finest flavor. Russian troops departed, and all Russian civilians were given the option to become U.S. citizens. The saga, however, did not end there. Intent on embarrassing President Johnson, who was impeached in February 1868, but who survived removal from office by one vote, House Republicans refused to appropriate any cash for the purchase. Moreover, the prominent Massachusetts family claimed it should receive some of the $7.2 million as repayment for arms it allegedly provided Russia during the Crimean War. Finally, in July 1868, after Johnson lost the Democratic presidential nomination, the House of Representatives voted 113 to 43 to hand over the money to Russia. A congressional investigation later determined that Sauckel and the Russian minister bribed lobbyists and journalists during this time period. Private notes written by Johnson and other U.S. officials suggested that Sauckel, with Seward's knowledge, likewise made tens of thousands of dollars in illicit payments to members of Congress. Scandal notwithstanding, Seward wasted no time in enjoying the fruits of his labor, headed to Alaska within months of retiring from government in 1869. In Sitka, he toured a brewery and sawmill, attended church, met with city council, viewed a military parade, and walked the streets. There was a curious melody of population and costume, his son would later write. Russians in their national dress, United States soldiers in their blue uniforms, Indians in blankets and feathers, and traders and travelers clad in the latest style of Montgomery Street, San Francisco. Seward also journeyed further north to the camp of the government scientists and accurately predicted that Alaska would become both a state and a tourist attraction. Today, an Alaskan city, highway, and peninsula are all named for him, as is a state holiday that commemorates his once ridiculed purchase. I want to thank you all for watching today, and I hope you stay blessed and stay safe. And remember to smile, because I love you, but more importantly, God loves you. Bye. I'll see you in my next video.